She walked into the grand hall of the Whitmore estate with a canvas bag over her shoulder, and a calm demeanor so understated she seemed invisible amid the sea of tailored suits and shimmering silk gowns. Emma Carter wore a charcoal gray linen dress, a faded light blue cardigan with frayed hems, and soft leather flats that made no sound on the gleaming marble floor. But her silence did not earn respect. It only made her an easier target. "A housemaid lost in the drawing room," a man's voice called out, half laughing, half mocking. "I'm guessing, an ex here to collect a debt?" A young woman tilted her head and whispered to her friend, loud enough for Emma to hear, but Emma didn't respond. Nor did she frown. She merely adjusted the strap of her bag, her light brown eyes directed toward the front row of chairs, where the lawyer would sit. The diamond-studded crowd glanced at her as if she didn't exist. What they didn't know was that the woman they were laughing at hadn't come to beg for a share, but to deliver a lesson. And today, in the very place they believed only the worthy could sit, a truth would surface that would silence the entire room. Laughter rang out, light as glass clinking, yet sharp as shattered crystal. In the Whitmore Mansion's grand hall, everything was curated to perfection, from the wine-colored silk-covered walls to the cascading crystal chandeliers that hung like frozen waterfalls. The air held the scent of old money, polished mahogany, aged leather, and high-end perfume. The people scattered throughout the room looked like they'd stepped out of a heritage fashion magazine. Cashmere coats, Dior dresses, watches worth more than a downtown apartment. Emma stood near a tall, brass-trimmed window, where early spring light filtered through sheer lace curtains. She remained silent, gripping her canvas bag with both hands, while around her, glances began to gather like flies around a blemish no one wanted to acknowledge. "I swear I saw her tidying up the living room last time," a sly female voice rang out. "That bag? Looks like something from the dollar store," another chimed in, half joking, half contemptuous. Across the room, a man with slicked-back hair and a collar stiff as steel narrowed his eyes at Emma. Graham Whitmore, Julian's grandson, leaned back in his chair, his gold tie gleaming like his laughter. "Did someone call the maid to bring out the wine?" he said loud enough for both rows to hear. The room burst into laughter. Not loud, but crisp, controlled, measured like every gesture in this room, elegant and cruel. A young woman, Clara Whitmore, Julian's granddaughter, a startup founder and social media influencer, smirked, pulling out her phone and whispering to her friend Elise, the former assistant to the Whitmore Group CFO. "Snap it quick. This scene's going up on my story tonight," Clara said, turning her phone toward Emma. "Thought this was a will reading, not open casting for background extras," Elise giggled, snapping a photo and tagging it with "Whitmore Soup Kitchen Nice or Freeloader, show up." Emma still didn't react. She was used to being judged by appearances. She'd been looked at many times as though her presence was an offense, an ink blot on silk. But this time, beneath chandelier light, with suppressed laughter and dozens of phone-sneaking photos, the humiliation felt more tangible than ever. An older woman in an emerald gown, Edith, Julian's cousin, whispered to her husband, "She's disgracing the family. Just look at what she's wearing. Doesn't belong here." Graham took a sip of champagne, then set his glass down on the ebony table in front of him. A mischievous gleam lit up his eyes like a child about to wreck someone else's birthday party. "Watch this," he muttered to the man beside him. He grabbed a small napkin from the table, pulled a marker from his suit pocket, and scrawled, "Charity Case" in bold letters. With a swift motion, he stepped behind Emma, pretended to adjust a chair, and quietly tucked the napkin into the strap of her bag, like slapping a bargain label on a discount store item. Laughter rippled from those who saw it as if they'd just witnessed a perfectly executed, mean-spirited skit. Elise nudged Clara, legendary. "This'll go viral," she whispered, laughing breathlessly. Emma felt a faint tug behind her shoulder but didn't turn around. She knew somehow they'd done something to turn her presence into a public joke. Graham returned to his seat, arms folded, satisfied like an actor after a flawless performance. The others, some sneering, some pretending not to notice, all understood the game had begun. and the quiet woman in the corner was the prey. "Bold of her," a woman's voice rang out. "Did no one tell her this was a family meeting?" Another man added, "She probably thinks she'll get some inheritance for cleaning toilets." Lillian, Julian's sister-in-law, craned her neck, eyes scanning Emma from head to toe. "Is anyone calling security?" she declared as if she owned the place. "We can't just let anyone walk in and sit for Julian's will reading." Marianne, the ex-wife of Julian's late younger brother, rose to her feet, her stiletto heels tapping rhythmically on the marble floor. She walked toward Emma, her smile polite but her eyes like daggers. "Ma'am, if this is a misunderstanding, you'd best leave before things get unpleasant," she said, tapping the canvas bag with her bright red nail. Emma looked at her for a few seconds, neither defiant nor afraid, just an unsettling calm. Then she turned away again, her gaze fixed once more on the empty chair up front, where the lawyer would sit. Clara snapped another photo, this time more centered, with the chandelier light catching the low-tied brown hair at the nape of Emma's. She uploaded it immediately to her Instagram story, captioning, "Some people just don't know their place. Inheritance imposter, jagged drama incoming." The room began to buzz as the clock neared 10. The vintage leather chairs filled with people bracing themselves for big news. Who would inherit Whitmore Industries, the luxury hotel chain, the tech campus, and the art collection worth hundreds of millions? Emma didn't move. The UFA case napkin still dangled from her bag, like a flag of shame they tried to brand her with. But she made no move to remove it, because she knew it wouldn't be long before they were the ones who didn't know their place. The clock in the grand hall struck exactly 10 a.m. The intricately carved mahogany doors swung open, and Harold Grayson, Julian Whitmore's private attorney for over 2 decades, stepped in, carrying an old but weighty brown leather briefcase. Without a single greeting or wasted glance, he walked straight to the leather chair by the fireplace, the very chair where Julian used to read on crisp October afternoons. The room fell quickly into silence. All eyes turned to Grayson. All, except Emma Carter's. Her gaze remained calm, fixed squarely on the briefcase in his hands. She didn't know if they were watching her or him, but it didn't matter. Suddenly, a sharp noise rang out. Graham Whitmore shot to his feet, pointing at Emma like a judge delivering a sentence. "She has no reason to be here. Julian would never have let someone like her step foot in this estate, let alone attend the reading of his will." "She's an imposter," Edith interjected. "Clearly up to something. Who even let her in here?" "Maybe she stole an invitation," someone else shouted. Grayson raised his head, his aged eyes drifting from Emma to Graham. He didn't respond yet. Emma remained silent. Under the chandelier's light, the napkin labeled charity case fluttered lightly on her canvas bag. Someone snickered. "Has anyone called security?" Lillian asked, more indignant than concerned. Graham sneered. "I already did. Should be on their way." The entire room seemed coated in a cold fog of contempt and pretension. Emma didn't defend herself, but her eyes, quiet, steady, and laced with meaning, were beginning to make the loudest voices feel strangely uneasy. Without knowing why, Harold Grayson slowly unfastened the dark brown briefcase, his bony fingers moving with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime handling documents that shaped the fate of empires. He pulled out a red wax-sealed envelope. Handling it with such care it seemed a single breath might shatter the thick air in the room. "I shall begin," he said, his voice deep and steady like the ticking of a grandfather clock echoing through a marble hallway. "We are gathered today for the reading of the final will and testament of Mr. Julian Whitmore, signed and notarized 3 years ago." 3 years? Clara blurted out. "Julian only went missing 6 months ago." "No body was ever found," Graham cut in. "How can this be legally binding?" Grayson silenced them by slicing through the wax with a silver letter opener, then unfolding the inked document. Without looking up, he read each word deliberately. "I, Julian Elias Whitmore, being of sound mind and clarity, do hereby declare this to be my final and lawful will, regarding all of my assets, including shares in Whitmore Industries, all properties, bank accounts, intellectual property, my private art collection, and all other unlisted holdings. I leave none of it to family, business associates, or any blood relatives. The room grew so silent, you could hear the faint clink of glass against porcelain in the far corner. A few people let out cynical chuckles, assuming this was the opening to a cruel joke. I leave everything to one person only, the one who stood by me not for wealth, not for reputation, not for power, the one who never once asked how much was in my bank account, the only person I ever truly trusted, my wife, Emma Carter. The air shattered like glass falling onto stone. Wife? Preston gasped, his voice breaking. Julian never. Clara dropped her phone. The crack of the screen echoed like the sound of truth striking pride. Elise glanced around, desperately hoping someone would laugh and say this was all a joke. Grayson lifted his gaze, eyes landing on Emma. Without a word, he slowly retrieved a stack of documents. A marriage certificate, wedding photos at City Hall, handwritten letters in blue ink, and a small silver USB drive. And this, he said, is a video from their wedding, March 12th, 7 years ago. In that moment, no one spoke. No one moved. Time itself seemed suspended between shallow breaths and stunned gazes, all fixed on the one person they had all once dismissed as an outsider. Emma Carter. The woman they mocked, sneered at, secretly, photographed. The one who stood silently beneath crystal chandeliers like a smudge on their perfect portrait of the elite. And now, that very name was paired with the word wife. No one noticed when Emma began walking forward. Her flats made no sound, yet each step cut through the silence like a blade. Her faded blue cardigan fluttered slightly behind her. The linen dress swayed with slow but certain strides. Light from the window streamed across her low-tied hair, casting a quiet glow on her face. Not from makeup, but from a truth that could no longer be hidden. She stopped beside Grayson's table, her hand still gripping her bag strap. The old lawyer handed her the folder with a subtle nod. Emma opened it, her eyes falling on a photograph. Her and Julian in front of City Hall, his arm around her shoulders, both beaming with joy. Something flickered across her lips. Not pride, but memory. She closed the folder, drew a deep breath, and turned toward the crowd. "I'm not here to claim anyone's fortune," Emma began. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried, steady as a bell tolling in an abandoned chapel. "I came to say which one of you would mourn Julian for the man he was, not for what he left behind." No one stirred, not even a sharp breath. Emma's eyes passed over them one by one, stopping at Clara. "Graham, Lillian, not accusing but not forgiving either. And you gave me the answer," she finished. Graham shot up from his chair, forcing a bitter laugh. "So you're saying you're Julian Whitmore's wife?" He flung a hand toward her worn dress, voice sour with disbelief. "Look at you, this is ridiculous. Julian married someone like you? You don't belong in this world." Emma looked at him, her gaze undisturbed. "I know," she said. "That's exactly why he chose me." Clara crossed her arms, lips curled into a smirk. "A photo means nothing. Anyone can fake a story. I haven't seen enough proof." Lillian nodded, firm. "We demand verification. This could all be staged. A sophisticated scam." Grayson said nothing. He quietly plugged the USB into the laptop on the table. The screen behind him lit up, grainy, filmed on an old camera, but clear enough to see Julian. Younger by a few years, in a simple gray suit, holding the hand of a woman in a plain white dress. No veil, no diamonds. Emma, in the sigh. Video, they laughed, genuinely, radiantly. Not a magazine smile, not a rehearsed grin for the press. Beside them stood an older woman and a bespectacled man clapping gently, two witnesses whose signatures appeared on the marriage license. Clara lowered her head. Elise stared at the screen as if hypnotized. Graham reached for his phone, unsure what he was even trying to do. A room once filled with people who held the reins of inheritance now sat frozen, watching the simplest truth they'd long denied come to life on screen. Marianne was the first to break the silence, her voice trembling with rage. This is clearly staged. She knew we'd question her, so she built this whole performance. Why did you even come here, to humiliate us? Emma turned to her. Her face now wasn't soft. It had sharpened, quiet as a winter river. No, I came to see if any of you had enough character not to humiliate yourselves. She paused, then reached into her canvas bag and pulled out a small black remote. Her finger rested lightly on the center button. She pressed it. The screen changed. Julian Whitmore. His hair now streaked with gray, eyes like cold glass. His face leaner but still carrying the poise of a man used to making final decisions. The timestamp ticked in the corner. April 15th, 2025, 10:32 a.m. A live video. No one could find the words. Hello, Julian said, his voice low, measured, but it hit the room like the voice of judgment itself. I heard everything, saw everything, and Emma was right. You've shown us who you really are. Graham stepped back and bumped into a chair. Clara stammered. Lillian clutched her pearl necklace as if it could save her from sinking. Emma stood firm, unflinching, unbowed. The light from the screen cast across her face, the face of a woman they all once thought was nothing. And now she was the one reshaping the entire world they thought they ruled. Julian was never dead, Emma said, her voice steady and sure. He stepped back, to see who would remain when there was nothing left to gain. She turned her gaze directly on Graham. Not a single one of you. The doors at the back of the hall opened, without a sound, and then Julian Whitmore walked in, not through a screen, but in the flesh, carrying with him a silence heavier than any words ever uttered in that room. No black suit, no silk tie. He wore a white button-up with sleeves rolled up, a dusted ash-gray canvas coat, and worn leather shoes. Yet despite the plainness of his attire, he walked like the ground itself adjusted to make way. The room held its breath. Graham took a step, back, his lips moving but no words coming out. Clara stood frozen, phone still in hand, its screen dark, like even it understood there was nothing left to broadcast. Lillian dropped her pearl necklace, each bead scattering across the marble floor, clinking like broken pieces of conscience. Julian stopped beside Emma. He looked at no one else before gently placing a hand on her back, a gesture unassuming yet full of power. Emma turned to face him, and for the first time since she stepped into the room, her eyes softened. They stood together like two parts of a whole. No need for explanation, no need for justification. Julian turned to the crowd. His voice was deep, clear, and never had to rise to command the room. Emma is my wife. She has always been my wife. And everything you just did, I saw it all. A ripple moved through the room. Those who once sat tall, now braced as though the floor itself might turn against them. She warned me, Julian continued, that if I disappeared, and if my estate was large enough, you'd forget who I was, and reveal who you really are. His gaze landed on Graham. You called my wife a charity case, laughed at her in front of strangers. You, Preston, Clara, Lillian, Edith, Marianne, all of you have removed yourselves from this family. Graham snapped, trying to salvage his footing. Julian, you can't be serious. This was just a misunderstanding. We didn't know. Julian turned, the blue in his eyes cooling by degrees. That's the problem. You didn't know, and you didn't care to. You looked at a simple woman and assumed she didn't belong, never once considering, maybe you don't. Clara jumped in, voice quick and panicked. I'm sorry, really. It was a moment of impulse. I didn't. You turned my wife into a meme. Julian cut her off. For likes, for clicks. You didn't just humiliate her. You monetized her pain. He turned to Grayson and gave a firm nod. The lawyer opened a second folder. This is a codicil, Grayson said. Signed and witnessed 1 month ago. Under it, anyone documented, via security footage, witness testimony, or online content, as having directly or indirectly insulted Mrs. Emma Carter Whitmore, is hereby removed from all inheritance rights and legally barred from accessing any Julian Whitmore assets. He began reading names one by one, each like a tolling funeral bell. Graham Whitmore, Clara Whitmore, Lillian Archer, Edith Dovell, Marianne Blake, Elise Tran, Preston Whitmore, Trevor Sinclair. Each name brought a bowed head, a whispered curse, a step back, averted eyes, then security entered. Not aggressive, just the embodiment of consequences. Each person was escorted out. No arguments, no pleas, only shock, and the dawning realization that they had lost what they thought was theirs by birthright. Clara resisted, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Julian, you can't. People will see this. Online." Grayson tapped a button. Clara's phone vibrated violently in her hand. Notifications popped up. Account permanently suspended. Sponsorship terminated. Media contract voided. Julian looked straight at her. When you use the internet to shame others, it will come back the same way. "Welcome to reality." Lillian tried to speak but only managed to turn her back, stepping right on her own pearls. The final crack echoed like a judgment that needed no words. The room emptied. Those once at the top, now ushered out of the very place they thought was theirs. And when the doors finally closed, only Emma, Julian, Grayson, and a few others remained. The ones who had said nothing, but had also never laughed. The room now held only a few quiet souls, 3 faces humble still, who had not laughed nor looked away when Emma entered. Sarah Ellis, a retired nurse, and a witness to Emma and Julian's wedding, stood quietly, her eyes misting. Michael Reed, the estate's librarian, gave Emma a gentle nod, a silent acknowledgement, and Anna, the Whitmore estate's elderly gardener, still held the same glass of water she had handed Emma that morning, without question, without judgment. Julian turned to them, his voice softer now. "You 3. You saw her. Truly saw her." When everyone else only saw her clothes and her shoes, Emma smiled and stepped forward. "I didn't come here to win," she said, her voice calm as wind brushing over a hilltop. "I came because I wanted to believe they could be better, but it seems I was wrong." She looked around, her eyes pausing on the empty chairs, the half-finished glasses, the pearls shattered on the floor. "I don't need the estate," Emma said. "I just needed Julian to be alive, and now I have him. As for them, all they have left is themselves." Julian squeezed her hand. "You were right from the beginning, and you're stronger than anyone in that room ever dared to." Grayson went outside the window. The April sky stretched wide and blue. Sunlight filtered through the trees and gently touched Emma's hair. Not golden, not glamorous. Just light. And the truth. If this story hit you hard, drop a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and hit that subscribe button for more stories that cut deep and lift high. Your support keeps the truth shining through, even when the world tries to look away.